very warm welcome to Compliance Demystified, Employment of Children. We're very lucky to have Tom with us today, who is our lead in juvenile employment and safeguarding here at the Council. We're very grateful he's been able to spare us some time today. So these webinars are produced by the Business Regulatory Support Team. We are the point of contact for businesses seeking compliance support from Cornwall Council. For example, if you are maybe thinking about starting up a new business and want to make sure you're getting health and safety right, making sure you and your team have compliant food hygiene practices, or maybe you are an established business who is going through some staff or premises changes, perhaps changing your business operations or wanting to expand and grow. We have the expertise to help you get the correct advice to keep you on the right side of the law. Our advice comes from Cornwall Council officers who have vast experience in achieving compliance in food hygiene, licensing, health and safety, trading standards, and more. Some achievements of the team in the past year: we have helped a massive 98% of inspected Cornish food businesses to become broadly compliant with food hygiene legislation. This work helps to maintain confidence in the reputation of Cornwall's food sector for residents and visitors alike. We've also won a national award this year for improving the delivery of food hygiene inspections in Cornwall. Each month, we run food safety training courses here at New County Hall in Truro. These courses help food businesses train their staff to achieve essential level 2 and 3 level qualifications, which are accredited by Highfield, which is one of the UK's leading food safety training bodies. From our courses so far this year, learners have achieved a 99% pass rate, which is a testament to the high regard local businesses show for ensuring good food hygiene standards for customers. Our mission is to help your business avoid costly consequences from non-compliance, protect your reputation, and support you and your team to run safely, legally, and successfully. These webinars are also supported by the great people over at the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Growth Hub. The Growth Hub have helped thousands of local businesses achieve their growth ambitions, and I'm pleased to work with Kirsty and the team, who are a huge asset for Cornwall's business community. If you scan the QR code shown here, it will take you to their website where they offer a free business review, during which the team will help you discover all of the business support available to you, from business support programs to funding and free events, all to help fuel your business's growth. So please do get in touch with them. And finally, from me, you can breathe a sigh of relief, is just to mention quickly, there are a number of other webinars scheduled over the course of this year, and we would love for you to join them if you can and help spread the word. The webinars like this one are completely free. They contain valuable information compiled by various teams across the council. They include clarifying the laws around planning permission, health and safety, and the free support available to help you start and grow a successful business in Cornwall. Thank you for listening to me. I'm now going to hand you over to Tom to begin the webinar. Over to you, Tom, when you are ready.
Thank you, Luke. Right, yeah, so to introduce myself again, I'm Tom Thorpe. I'm the Juvenile Employment Officer for Cornwall Council. So fundamentally, I do performance, safeguarding within child performance, but also within employment. This presentation has come about through the Commercial Food and Safety team and the work I do with them. And compliance, obviously. So that's why Luke's helped a lot with getting this together. And it's definitely got a slant towards children in catering, which we will come on to in employment. But if there's any other questions that arise to the employment of children in other sectors, then we can do that as well. There's no problem. Okay, so starting on first slide, yeah, obviously we've got what's in this webinar down the right-hand side. We've got child employment laws. Yeah, quite simply, why are they there? Why have we got the child employment laws that protect our children's health, safety, and educational prospects? Where I work is under primary legislation, which we could come on to, but I think we're going to talk in a more practical sense, hopefully. But the laws are also there to protect employers as well, and we're here to help employers make sure that they are complying with the laws, to make sure they're not breaking any laws or get themselves in any trouble or risk the children. Okay, the must-knows for a business employing children. So no child aged under 13 can be employed. So this is, when we're talking about employment, full stop, the child has to be 13 to be employed under any context. There's then differences within the law between 13 and 14-year-olds and then 15 and 16-year-olds in terms of hours, which we'll come on to. but under 13, no child can be employed. I'll come on to what the definition of employed is, because that's kind of interesting for, especially for local business, family businesses, things. So child, in terms of the upper end of when juvenile employment law, when I'm kind of interested in what's going on, the law around juvenile employment, it ends at the end of the school year that they turn 16. So the end of June of the academic year they turn 16. This is like a massive, not, I wouldn't say issue, but a misconception that people think 16th birthday, these laws don't apply. It's not. It's that end of June of the school year that you turn 16. So if you're 16 in September, it's following through to the end of June. And the law is basically, the premise of the law is a lot of it is children can undertake light work. We'll come on to what that means in terms of catering and hospitality. There are laws and rules to be observed to ensure that education doesn't suffer, which is an important part of any childhood, and that there's safeguards whilst at work. So if we've got children working, we want to be safe at work. I should go. That's then saying about the education suffering. Sorry. It is important to say that we issue permits, which I'll come on to, but we can actually revoke licenses. If the education is suffering, employment never takes precedent over that. So we always kind of work with schools, and if education is suffering because of employment, then we can revoke licenses or refuse to issue as well. Education always takes priority in a child's life, for us anyway. So when is a child considered employed? This is quite important, I think, for a lot of people, business owners particularly, and families. The child is employed if they insist in a trade or occupation carried out for profit. So it's not defined by whether they're paid. There's no minimum wage for young people. Some of you may be aware of that. That comes in when you're over 18. But with a juvenile, it's not whether they're being paid or not. It's whether they're classed as employed. It's whether they're contributing to the business. And this includes working for a parent or family's business. So this is quite, there is a distinction to be made here. For example, a farmer who has his son or daughter out in a field helping with them might not be, a single farm might not be classed as employed. If though they had multiple workers working in the field and the young person was helping with that, then that would be classed as employed. Equally with like family businesses, if a child's contributing to it, be it a takeaway, a local shop, a family shop, or a family business, if the child is contributing to that business and there's other people employed there, then that's classed as employed, regardless of whether they're being paid. And that's a big misconception with people, which will come on to the misconceptions, but people often think, well, it's a family business. It's up to us what we do. But if they are contributing to the business, they're classed as employed, and the same rules and laws apply. Which, when you think about it, makes perfect sense. We don't want young people being exploited, and they can be by their own families at times. So all employed children, or all children that work, must have a work permit. It's a really simple process. When people apply for work permits, they'll always come back to me and say, actually, it's quite a straightforward process. You can download the form through that QR code. You can also go on our website. The actual application form is obviously the young person's details, the details of business. It's signed off by their parent or legal guardian and by the employer. And then within that, once you've signed off, you've declared there that you're going to comply with the hours. And there's obviously declarations there that say you're going to employ that young person legally. That work permit then comes to us, and then we can scrutinise it. We make checks with schools to see what their school attendance is like, for example, see if there's any issues there. We also make check on our social care systems for the young people that are getting work permits. And if then there's an issue that's raised through that, then we can go back to the young person, their family, or the employer and say there's reasons maybe why that young person can't be employed or might not be in their best interests, or if consideration needs to be made. That's not to say that we always take school's word as a definitive. We have had examples where a young person has had a work permit applied for a business. The school has said, well, this child's not attending school at the moment. And I've looked into it further, we've investigated it, and actually that employment was the only good thing really, sadly, going on in that young person's life at that time. So we took all the information we had and decided we were going to issue that permit, even though the school said no, and then the school can follow their own processes to do with attendance and chasing up the parents. But we felt it was in the best interest of the child, and that is always the centre of what we do, hopefully, always in the best interest of the child. But the actual process of applying for a work permit, if you haven't already, is quite straightforward. It also has to come from the employer. We do get some work permits sent in by parents and things, unless they are the employer, of course. But it has to be sent in by the employer because they're the ones responsible for the employment. These are the hours that children can legally work. Now, when I said about the work permits, people often come to this and think, oh, that's quite straightforward. People often come to the hours that children can legally work and think, this seems very outdated. Unfortunately, it is in primary legislation. There's parts of the legislation around employing young people that's in bylaws and things we might be able to affect, but the hours is in primary legislation. So I'll just read you through quickly and you'll see, I think most people would be surprised. Not during school hours. That's, I think, quite straightforward. I hope that everyone will agree with that. Where we can have problems with the homeschool children. So if you've got a child who isn't attending a mainstream school and is educated at home, parents can say, well, why can't they work during that school day? We say that they can't work during the school day and they have to comply as well for that to be home educated students. That's to protect them as well, because if you've got a young person working in a restaurant and they're 14, 15 years old during a school day, that's going to attract a lot of attention. It's going to be difficult for them. So yeah, not during school hours. No more than 12 hours in any school week. I think that's quite reasonable personally. Not before 7 a.m. or after 7 p.m. Later than 7 p.m. is a thing that will surprise some people, for especially 15, 16-year-olds, but that is in primary legislation. That's what's requested. So yeah, I think, well, I'll come on to in a moment what changes are afoot. But at the moment, no later than 7 p.m. and that's included on Saturdays, Fridays, school holidays. A juvenile up until that last weekend in June of the school year, they turn 16, cannot work later than 7 p.m. No more than 2 hours on a school day, obviously to protect their education. No more than 2 hours on a Sunday. This is, my personal opinion. I have to give my personal opinion. Obviously, be careful, but that's a very old-fashioned one. But it is in the legislation. No more than 2 hours on a Sunday. No more than 5 hours on Saturdays for 13, 14-year-olds and 8 hours for 15, 16-year-olds. So there's quite long hours, really. 15, 16-year-olds particularly can work. And then no more than 25 hours in a school holiday week for 13, 14-year-olds and 35 for 15, 16-year-olds. So there are parts of that I personally find difficult. I would say that obviously change of government, but there is real push at the moment to get these hours changed. There has been petitions raised before that haven't attracted enough signatures for it to be debated. But anyone, I think almost all, because I deal with lots of people in my position across other local authorities, they all look at these and think these are very old-fashioned, but especially the 2 hours on a Sunday. But these are the law, these are the legislation. You will not get a different answer from me in terms of what a child can work. And if you employ a child outside of those hours, then that isn't legal. So you need to comply with those until they change. Myths of juvenile employment. I've probably touched on some of these already, but just to go through the things that are always levelled at me and discussed. The first one I have touched on, if a child is helping in a family business, the laws don't apply. They do. If they're contributing to the business, remember they're classed as employed, whether they're being paid or not. This can have some issues with some people culturally. We've had some takeaways where it's very seen as a very, almost a coming of age where the children help. But actually, when we've been involved, people call in and say, well, there's a young person working at a family takeaway for many hours. It seems, it does give us leverage to go and say that the class is employed, they're working too much, and we need to do something about this. So it's really important that if it's even a family business, the same hours, the same rules apply. Also, you get a lot of these rules weren't around when I was a kid. I used to work down the mine, but whatever it might be, they were around. These have been around for 90 years. A lot of these rules. So yeah, they were around. Unfortunately, whether you comply to them, whether people now in the local authority and across the country comply to all of them, is a debate. But they were around. I also get, why does the local authority want to stop children working? I don't. We don't. The local authority, I think, recognise that work is a really important part of a young person's development. We want to promote it safely and within the reach of the law, basically. So yeah, we don't want to stop children working. I personally, work was a big part of my youth growing up, and I see it as a really beneficial thing if done safely and if done properly. Yeah, and then we get that it's good for them, Yeah, I do know. The parents have said it's fine, so that's enough for me. You get a lot of this. We've had the parents come in, they've signed this, they say it's absolutely fine. If you think about that for any time at all, you realise that doesn't really stack up. You can't have a parent saying, I'm happy for my child to work illegally. It doesn't really comply. Equally, you couldn't say, waive your child's right to break other rules, could you, or laws. So unfortunately, it doesn't apply, or fortunately. They also get a lot of the age problems that I did talk about. They're 16, so none of these rules now apply. As we said earlier, it does apply up until that last weekend in June of the academic year they turn 16. And also, people sometimes even read the legislation and say, well, it's during school holidays or it's on weekends. So they might have their own opinions, but those hours for a school-age child apply. So what if, because maybe you might be there thinking, well, I know of employers that aren't doing this. What is the risk to them? What is the risk to the young person? Why do people get these? Well, it's in legislation, it's in law. We do request these work permits, and they're there for good reasons, aren't they? So we can track young people working. We can check they're being safeguarded. If there's any question in a work permit that the job might not be, because there's lots of things that children can't do, which I'll come on to in terms of catering. But it gives us the ability to look at those, and lots of times we go and visit sites and think actually they can't do that, or they can do that, but make sure that it's done safely and legally. It gives us oversight on what our young people are doing. For example, yesterday there was a child who a work permit came in for them to work at the harbour. Now you first look at that and think that could be, or a boatyard, it could be very bad. That could be completely against legislation. Industrial undertaking. I actually went down there and visited and spoke to them and saw what the young person would be doing, and it was fine. They would be there helping the boats, leisure boats go in and out of the water, a bit of work in the office, and it was all legal and I could sign it off. So there is good reason for this. Also, insurance is a big thing that people don't often think about. If you don't have a child who is legally employed and has a work permit, the insurance company, which would cover every other member of staff for that business, could potentially turn around and say that young person shouldn't have been there. They didn't have a work permit, or they were working too late, or they were doing something that was illegal. We've had one recently, I obviously won't go into detail to identify, but we had one recently where a young person was very seriously injured in a catering business, and they didn't have a work permit. They shouldn't have been there. And I don't know what's happened with that insurance company, but I know that it'd be a lot more straightforward if there was an adult that had the same injuries. The liabilities insurance for that business would have covered it, no question. I don't know where they're going to stand on a young person who shouldn't have been there and was working illegally, and that's a tragedy for that young person. And obviously, the worst case scenario for the employer is they're prosecuted. When there is laws, there is prosecution rights that we have. It's not something that happens commonly. That injury that I alluded to for the young person, that's actually going through the health and safety rules, which are obviously a lot more stringent, and we're supporting that case. But yeah, just to say with businesses, our first port of call when we get information, which we do from members of the public, from schools, from businesses, is to go and give the information and make sure they put things right. We're not in there straight to say we're taking you to court tomorrow. Our first chance is to go and speak to them and say, look, do you understand what you need to be doing employing young people? So specifically for catering businesses, we understand in Cornwall that catering and hospitality make up a huge sector, for our employment, and therefore young people opportunities within catering. I also understand that children probably always worked in these over the years. I'm not from Cornwall myself, but I'm from a rural community and a tourist place. They've always worked in hospitality, and there's evidence around that increasing in recent years, especially post-COVID, and also the cost of living, people not being able to afford to live in, workers not being able to afford to live in some of our coastal towns because of house prices and rents and Airbnb. There's many reasons. That does mean that more and more young people are getting drawn into employment, and it's something we're definitely seeing and something we're definitely concerned about in some instances, because there's gaps to be filled, basically, and young people sometimes fill those gaps. But this isn't a problem. When children are employed safely and legally, that's not a problem, but there is a risk of exploitation. So can children legally work in hospitality? Yes, they can, but there are limitations and there are restrictions. These are the adopted bylaws, which we adopted, we've had for 25 years. They say that children cannot work employed in a commercial kitchen. So taken where that becomes a little bit of an interpretation, is what can't they do in a commercial kitchen? Why they can't do that is obviously to protect them from injury, from the cooking process, all the dangerous things that are in a kitchen and in a confined space. Children cannot work in proximity to fryers, ovens, hot plates, slicing machines. I think people would most members of the public, you ask them to brainstorm, what's safe for a young person, a child to work in, they would say, yeah, we don't want children working on fryers. And there's a law against it. We don't want children doing that. So what is allowed in catering and hospitality? Well, we try and take a pragmatic approach, as I said. We do that by communicating with the businesses, looking at what the young person is specifically doing. Therefore, we do issue permits for children in hospitality where they're physically removed from the cooking area. So where they might be waiting tables, that's permissible. Where they're taking food to and from a pass, clearing tables. Also pot wash, but in a very distinct area. I had one last week actually where the pot wash area was very small, and just to the right of the pot wash area was the deep fat fryer, and it's bubbling away where they're dropping in food. So I had to say that the young person cannot work in that area. They're right next to the deep fat fryer. That's in a commercial kitchen. However, if it was in a very distinct pot wash area, which some premises and businesses do have, and we could see that, and the young person is spoken to, saying that you can't go into this area, but this is the area where you pot wash, that is permissible. So those are the two areas really where young people can legally work, and we would issue permits for businesses, waiting tables and working in a pot wash area. Anything to do with the cooking, we have had ones for 14, 15-year-olds for chef jobs and things. I should say where there's a misunderstanding, I'm not sure if I have this in the presentation actually, but just to say to you now, if there's any businesses that have had children there as work experience, that's under different legislation. So there's many things you can do in work experience that you cannot do as employed. It's different under employment law. So you can have children that go and work at Rick Stein's for their work experience and have a great time, and then I think, well, let's get them back in the kitchen for the summer. Legally, they can't. They can, like I said, be in the pot wash area waiting tables, but they can't be in the kitchen doing the things they may have been doing under work experience. That's because it's under different legislation, and work experience is risk assessed by the schools, and they should be under constant supervision. Whereas employment, there's an understanding that there's some autonomy to the young person working. So yeah, you do hear that quite a lot. That question mark over the difference between work experience and juvenile employment. So I don't know how many of you are employers or how many people here are, education professionals or parents, but what we need from employers specifically, we do take a pragmatic approach. We want to help employers. We want to give young people experiences in a safe and legal way. But what we do ask for them, we may come back to employers and say that we need more information on this before we can sign it off. That could include risk assessments, pictures of workspaces, or even a site visit, which I do quite often. That's a big part of my job in the employment side of it, going and seeing places. And like I said, I'm always trying to accommodate, because often the businesses that have got in touch with us are often quite engaged, and they want to do the right thing, and they want to give young people opportunities. So we're trying to accommodate it, but we're never going to obviously give advice that's prior to the or contrary to the law. So if there is employers out there, that are questioning, please do get in touch with us, and we can guide you through what young people can legally do. As I said, we might ask for things like risk assessments, but that shouldn't be an issue because most businesses should have risk assessments in place anyway. And then if they're employing a young person, there should be adaptations made to that to safeguard young people, because young people are different. They are a vulnerable group in that respect. They are new to the workplace and they need protecting. So hopefully that doesn't cause any issues. Like I said, also pictures. We sometimes ask for pictures. Just send me some pictures of where they're working, what the kitchen layout is. And then when we get that information back, then we can make an informed decision. And that's what it's all about, really, making an informed decision. Sometimes it's a no, we cannot issue a work permit for this. The young person should not be working in here, and then explaining the risks to them. But often we can find compromise and try and help. We're not the baddies, hopefully. I think, yeah, now we're down to questions. Well, thank you, obviously. So Laura says, do children have to be supervised? No, they don't need to be supervised at all times. That is a difference with the work experience side of it. But you may have supervision in place, and often when we have the work permits, it wouldn't be wise to leave a young person unsupervised monitoring a whole business, for example, because if there was a conflict or an issue. But we don't specifically issue permits on the premise that the child is constantly supervised. But if asked, we'd always say that an adult should be present when a child's working. We've got Elle saying, hi, I'm a mother. Can a young person work in a restaurant where they serve alcohol? They can, but it should be enclosed receptacles, so they shouldn't be. I bet this happens, but they shouldn't be selling open. They certainly shouldn't be working behind the bar, obviously. Shouldn't be putting pints or anything like that, obviously. They can take alcohol to tables, but it should be in a closed receptacle, which I think, like closed bottles of wine and things like that. But I think some restaurants do. Yeah, that's what the law is anyway. So if they're taking drinks to tables, sometimes under supervision, if there's two of them going to a table to serve it, hopefully the adult takes the alcohol. Working in care, we've got Laura. I'm not sure if that's the same Laura or the other Laura. There's two, I think. Working in care home activities. Yeah, that is. They shouldn't be involved in any personal care. We have had some work permit applications for young people working in care homes doing enrichment. I think that's been some wonderful examples of that. Young people working with, elderly people, giving them kind of activities and basically being involved in those activities. I think it's really massively beneficial, and being paid to do so. That's fine, but they shouldn't be involved in any personal care, and not even assisting in that personal care side. So really, in a care home, I would say the only jobs a young person could legally, with permanent, to do is enrichment or food. If they're working serving food, say, that would be another side. I'm sure there are lots of businesses, I think, that are employing children and maybe not having work permits. Do let me know. I mean, we can look at things, like I say, pragmatically, but we do want to know about these businesses and we do want to make contact with them because we want to get because there are some practices that are actually quite dangerous to children, and that's kind of why we're here. I've got another question here, Luke. Sorry, Victoria said, why is there no minimum wage? There legally isn't. The minimum wage that came in is for 18. I don't know. Where I would say we get involved with minimum wage is if there's an exploitation kind of angle to it. So if, for example, we found out a young person was working for a very, very little amount, or hopefully working within legal hours, then we could get involved under safeguarding and contact the employer and look at the exploitation route. We've got links with MACE, which is our, child exploitation. So that would be of interest. But yeah, there is no minimum wage, and you often get employers saying, well, how they're doing the righteous thing, employing young people, and you think, well, you are employing them for less money, which is some businesses' motivations, if I'm honest. I know that. What happens if there's no permit as well? Well, that's when we would go and contact the employer, basically. So if we understand there's a young person working somewhere and there's no permit in place, then we'd be contacting the employer and giving them a chance to rectify that. If it was simple as there's no permit, then that'd be, if there's other issues in terms of exploitation or safeguarding, then we could take steps on top of that. But otherwise, it'd be contacting the employer to say, do you realise you need permits? And I've also got another question there, Luke, saying, do you have guidance on pay for young people? I haven't got a number, of what a wage should be. But like I said, if they're, earning very little money, I definitely still want to know, and because I want to get in touch with employers, because that could be the exploitation route. But without putting hard and fast numbers on it, I do know that young people are paid less than the minimum wage across the board, really. And maybe some people say that's right because they're young workers. But yeah, do let us know if there's very low wages for work. We definitely want to know that. But we don't ask that, and we can't ask that, and we can't enforce a minimum wage. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. So Sue said, is it correct? Under 18s can serve alcohol under supervision. So there's a distinction here because there's under 18s and then there's juveniles in terms of juvenile employment law. So remember, juvenile employment law is up until the end of the school year that you turn 16, so they can't serve alcohol. Whereas a young worker, I believe, can under supervision when they pass the school age. But you have to be over 18 to serve alcohol on your own. So but yeah, I think a lot of bars generally and restaurants don't. I don't obviously get involved in a lot of over the age of the statutory school leaving age. But a lot of bars just say no under 18s serving alcohol. So yeah, there is a distinction there.
I think that concludes everything today. So thank you again, everyone, for joining. Thank you again, Tom. That was excellent, really good information. So thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you at some future webinars.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.